what I'm trying to do here, and I think you're the perfect person to speak to because you're untethered by your party, as it were. You're free to speak your mind. I'm trying to kind of.
Me anytime.
That's true. That is true. But even more so now than before. What I'm trying to do is kind of create, have a holistic picture of the issue of people coming to this island, whether by boat, whether by plane, whether with a visa, whether without a visa, as asylum seekers and so on. How would you sort this out? Where do you see clarity in this sort of Byzantine forest of complication?
I think we have to recognise that the refugees that are arriving from Calais are desperate people who are coming from war zones that we've often been involved with. And you have to look at the reasons behind that and do whatever one can to try and help people develop their societies at the point of source. I've been to Calais and I've met a lot of, frankly, disorientated, desperate people. Then the wider issue of much larger numbers of migration into this country is an important debate. We have at the moment 100,000 vacancies in the National Health Service. We have tens of thousands of vacancies in the care sector. We have crops rotting in the fields because nobody's available to pick them. And we have record numbers of job vacancies around the country. And we have an aging UK-born population in general. And if there isn't migration into this country, then the NHS wouldn't work without migrants, and it would absolutely stop if there weren't others coming in. So I think we have to recognise that the economic needs are enormous and look at it in that way. If you go to any NHS facility, you're going to be treated by people from all over the world, and you'll get fantastic treatment and care from them. Without migration, we wouldn't have a mental health service.
But
we wouldn't have one.
And the government, of course, know this, which is why they've been bringing in migrants from other parts of the world outside the European Union on visas in order to work in the care sector or in the NHS. So they know this is happening. Yeah. I just wonder if there's a way of kind of combining it all and saying, this economy needs more people, right? We know that. Even, the government knows that too. Let's try and organize all the various flows of people coming in, whether they are across the channel on boats or, or people coming in by plane with a visa. Of course, very difficult to come in by plane without a visa. You'll get stopped at the airport. The numbers are much smaller, would be much smaller. So how do we combine all this and make sure that we can have some agency or control over who comes onto this island?
We don't allow ourselves to descend into the awful rhetoric which is around in some places that somehow or other our society is ruined or damaged or whatever language is used by migration. Our society has been enriched by migration, and every one of us, all of us, I don't know about your own family background, but all of us look into our own family background, and people have come to this country from other parts of Europe or other parts of the world. I mean, that is
I came at the age of 8 from Germany. I'm a migrant as well, and and it's been a wonderful place for me to come and live in, and I feel very much at home here.
And you've made a great contribution here.
And thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you very much. But let's now drill down to some specifics.
Yeah.
So we hear that the news this morning on the front page of the Telegraph, which Ben Kentish talked about in the previous show, that the government is thinking of offering £10,000 to science and maths teachers around the world to bring them to this island, because actually we don't have enough of them, right? How insulting is that to a teacher who's currently on strike because they want, maybe an extra £2,000 or £3,000 in order to make ends meet?
Well, it is not a very sensible policy the government's pursuing here. First of all, we're not training enough teachers. And I think I'm right in saying 25% of all teachers, newly qualified teachers, leave the profession within 5 years because of both pay levels and the stress. And so, A, pay teachers properly, B, look seriously at the levels of stress of both school students and teachers and do something about that. Less testing, more teaching would be a good idea. Yes, if we want to bring in teachers from elsewhere, then obviously that's fine. But let's not rely on somebody else's training to bring in our maths teachers when we should be training them here.
But isn't that the conundrum? And the issue with teachers illustrates it perfectly. Ideally, we train people up in this country to do jobs that are needed in this country. It would be great to do that. And that's what, the Labour Party has said for years, and that's what the Tory Party has promised for years. And yet it's really hard to do that, we find. The training can't catch up with all the vacancies that need to be filled. And therefore, it's always much easier to get people from outside. That's just the reality.
Well, perhaps university fees being so high is a deterrent. Perhaps the pay levels is a big deterrent as well. If we want to develop our society, then we have to have more teachers, we have to have more medical workers, and we also have like most of Europe, actually, the population increase is brought about largely by migration. In most countries in Europe have an underlying falling population. And it's a very interesting issue that European population as a whole is falling. Inevitably, for the economies of all of Europe to survive, there's going to be more and more migration into Europe, whatever rhetoric far-right politicians tend to throw around. They know full well that if they don't have that migration, they won't have a transport system, they won't have an education system, they won't have a health service.
You heard Jeremy Corbyn there. His last point is that, we need more people. This economy needs more people. We can't train the people that we need fast enough. We need more people from outside, and we need to have, an honest conversation about that. Do you disagree with him?
Yes, absolutely, because we've got 5.2 million of our own people on out-of-work benefits. And yet we've got a record high population of, give or take, 70 million people. It's about 7 or 8 million more than 15 years ago. And yet people feel worse off. And the fact is that we've got an unaffordable housing crisis. We've got a crisis of being able to see a GP. We've got a waiting list crisis. And the two are directly linked because this government and previous governments haven't properly planned for population growth. As you say, you can have a national conversation whether or not you want to grow the population. If the people then said, yes, please can we grow the population, you've then got to plan around it accordingly. And that hasn't happened. That's why we've got the crisis we've got.